Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. But before we begin tonight's program, I would like us to take a moment to reflect on the awful situation that's happening in our beloved homeland of Israel. I'd like to introduce Cantor Sibo with a few thoughts on this.
Thank you, Joni. Thanks to you and to the chairs for this evening for giving me just 1 minute. Friends, in case you haven't had an opportunity to see what's going on the news or online, for the last 48 hours, Israel has been hit with hundreds of rockets, and not isolated to one part of the country, but in many different spots. Those of us with friends and relatives there, many of them have been in bomb shelters for the last day or more. So we wanted to just take this moment. We felt it was the proper and right thing to do, just to say a moment where we can say a little prayer for the land of Israel, for our sisters and brothers who are there, and for their safety. Avinu Sheba Shamayim Sur Yisrael V'Goloi Orech Et Midinat Yisrael. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace, and your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ye'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'yamru, amen. We pray that the one who makes peace in a high place will continue to make peace and send peace to Israel and to all humankind. And to this we can all say, amen. I've been asked to also share with all of you that Federation is working right now as we are on this meeting. Federation is gathering and planning a march for tomorrow at, I believe, 5 p.m. from the Maltz Museum to the Federation building, where there will be speakers and moments for us to join together in prayer and solidarity. Thank you all for allowing me this moment.
Amen. Thank you, Cantor Sibo. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joni Rubenstein, and I am part of the Presidential Council for the Temple Women's Association. This year, the pandemic and the quarantine has made this very challenging for our sisterhood. This tonight is our last event of the 2020-2021 season, and I'm so happy to see so many faces joining us tonight. We are already working on next year, so stay tuned. We're going to ask tonight that all of you keep muted your computers, your phones, your devices. There will be time for questions. If you could type your questions into the chat. Jen Mendelson is monitoring the chat, and I believe our speaker can see your questions. She will address as many of them as we have time for. This promises to be a great evening, and I think you'll all agree that our TWA has been the perfect antidote for the isolation of this pandemic. Right now, I would like to introduce Ginny Sukenik, who is going to introduce our speaker for this evening.
Ginny, you're muted.
Ginny, you're on mute.
Ginny, you're muted.
Okay.
Start over.
Yeah, I will. I'd like to start by thanking Bonnie Chiswick for her connection with Monica and arranging for her to speak tonight to us. Monica is an award-winning reporter, well known as one of Northeast Ohio's most reliable sources for health news. As senior health correspondent at WKYC-TV, she has earned the respect of the region's medical establishments, including the Academy of Medicine of Cleveland and Northern Ohio, for fair, accurate, and unbiased reporting. Monica has the ability to take even the most complicated medical procedure and make it understandable and relatable to viewers. Her stories are often broadcast nationally at other NBC stations, and her more than 25 Cleveland Clinic medical miracle specials have also been aired and shared in the Middle East and Turkey. She is also a brain tumor survivor and shared her journey and surgery with viewers. Her honesty and open telling of her story earned her an honorable mention for the National Gracie Awards for Women in Television. In October of 2019, Cleveland Clinic surgeons removed a portion of a large hemangioma behind her left eye. The residual tumor, still on her carotid artery, optic nerve, and her left eye and socket. Monica requires MRIs every 6 months to monitor the tumor growth and may eventually require radiation as the second part of her treatment. Monica is a native of Pittsburgh and enjoys weightlifting, hiking, and riding her Harley-Davidson motorcycle. She's also the lead singer for 2 bands, including the classic rock band, Monica Robbins and the Whiskey Kings, and the country band, the Ninja Cowboys. Her talk is going to be followed by question and answer session, as Joni said, and it's going to be led by Jen Mendelson. Please join me in welcoming Monica.
Jenny, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for allowing me to be part of this meeting. I know Bonnie and I had been planning on this for over a year, and then this brain tumor thing just kind of got in the way. But I want to thank Bonnie and Jenny for asking me to join you tonight. This, of course, it's National Women's Health Week, and I just thought I would share with you a few things that I never thought I would have to learn, because considering we've all experienced this pandemic, we've all been through our own, rough time. But a little bit of background on me. It was July 2nd, 2019, that I was getting ready to do the news. And I ended up getting a phone call about 4:30 in the afternoon. And I had had a CT scan the day before. And it was my doctor. It was an ocular plastic surgeon. And I went to see this plastic surgeon because I had had my allergist, I'd had tearing in my left eye, and my eye was always swollen. And my allergist had given me drops, and my ophthalmologist told me I just had dry eye. And for 2 years, I was dealing with this, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, one day I was getting an allergy shot, and I saw my allergist, and I said, "Hey, do you have anything better, stronger for this?" And she's like, "Well, wait, it's one eye." And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Yeah, that's not allergies." So she sent me to see an ocular plastic surgeon. And I'm thinking, woohoo, I'm getting older, and I probably am going to get an eye lift out of this, and maybe it's going to get covered by insurance. And he took one look at me, and he said, he did some measurements, and he said, "Monica, you have Graves' disease, ocular Graves' disease, and it's a thyroid disorder, and it's incurable, and there's no treatment, and you're probably going to go blind." And he's like, "It may reverse, and you may get your eyesight back." So I'm like, wait, what? And then he said, "I'm 99.9% sure it's Graves' disease, but I'm going to send you for a CT scan to make sure it's nothing else." And my head is exploding. And so the next I had to wait a week for insurance to kick in. So I waited a week, and then I went to get the CT scan. And as I'm sitting there waiting, it occurred to me, I knew I had a brain tumor. And the reason I knew that was because my dad had one. We found a brain tumor in my father 3 weeks before he passed away. And so in the pit of my stomach, I knew there's no history of thyroid disorders. I don't have a thyroid disorder. And sure enough, so 4:30 the next day, I get the phone call, "Hey, Monica, guess what? You have a mass behind your left eye. And let me help you find a brain surgeon." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay. I know brain surgeons." So I told my bosses, and I have a very sick sense of humor. And that's, I think, how I cope. And so the first thing I said to them was, we need to have a station contest to name it, name the tumor. So I was going to just call it Timmy for whatever. I like the alliteration. And the next thing I told them, we were in the process of changing our logo. So I said, I'm probably going to need an eye patch. So how cool would it be if we put the new circle channel 3 on my eye patch? And they were horrified. And they just looked at me like, your health reporter is telling you have a brain tumor, or she has a brain tumor. What are you going to do? And the only thing I said was, I don't think I'm going to make the news tonight. So I got in my car and I called Cleveland Clinic and I said, I need an appointment with a brain surgeon. And then I called UH and I said, I need an appointment with a brain surgeon. And then I had 2 days. The next day, it was 4th of July week. So the next day I had a couple of days to do research. And I tell people all the time, don't Google, because if you don't really know what to Google, you don't want to see what Google tells you, because usually it's always worst case scenario. But in my case, I knew what to Google. And unfortunately, for my type of tumor, I couldn't find a lot of information. And that was infuriating to me. And so anyway, I had a whole bunch of guesses, but I kind of narrowed down what I thought I had. And then 2 days later, I saw the brain surgeon and he said, hey, Monica, I know who you are. I know what you do. What do you think you have? And I'm like, it's probably a sphenoid wing orbital meningioma. You're not going to be able to get all of it. You're going to have to take some of it out because it's probably sitting on my carotid and it's going to kill me. And he looked at me and my husband was like, I told her not to Google. And Dr. Pablo Racinos looked at me and he said, you know exactly what you have. And I gave him that look that, okay, from this point forward, we're not going to talk about the bad stuff in front of him. I wanted him in his happy place. And that's just the way I chose to deal with it. I felt like I'm a realist and I understood what I had and what I was going to be dealing with. And I had a 50-50 shot. It was that simple. But when I was told that day, I went home and I, had that meltdown. I'm not making this up. It was like 30 seconds. And I did the old, oh, why me? Why me? And then I swear I heard my father, who's now in heaven, saying, get up and get busy. And I immediately thought, why not me? I hate that saying that God gives you what you can handle. But at the same time, I'm the health reporter. I'm in the best medical city on the planet. And I know brain surgeons. And you know what? I'm going to do whatever I can. I am going to be my best advocate. So that's the first thing I want you all to remember. The first thing I want you to remember is that there is no one on this planet who is going to take better care of you than you. And you know that old saying about when you're in the airplane and the oxygen mask falls down and they say, you got to put yours on first before you can take care of anybody else. Well, it's true, because you have to take care of you first, or you are useless to everybody else. And how you decide to go your journey, whatever that journey may be, whatever bad news comes your way, whatever good news comes your way, it is your journey. And there is no right way and there is no wrong way to tackle it, to hike it, to mountain climb it, whatever you want to do. It's your way. But at the same time, it's very important for all of us to remember, you never know what journey somebody else is on. And especially now in this pandemic, where so many people have lost loved ones, and so many people, maybe they lost their jobs, or they're in financial dire straits, or, with all the politics and everything else we've dealt with, and all the discrimination and everything else we've dealt with. It's really important for us to remember that. And it's really important for us to remember, the one thing I was bound and determined to remember was that kindness is the most important gift you can give anybody. And I decided that's how I was going to be. So one of the things I want you to remember is when the girl at the grocery store, seems flighty, or, or somebody cuts you off, or somebody, is just rude. First of all, I've learned over the years being in television and getting hateful emails that I've learned how to say, yeah, you, in a very diplomatic way. But I think it's really important to remember that we don't know the journey someone else is on. They may have just found out that morning that they have a brain tumor. So I want you to remember that going forward. The other thing I learned that I wish I didn't have to have the brain tumor teach me was this thing called gratitude. It's I've done medical reporting in Cleveland for 23 years, and I have met so many people. And I have to tell you that it's the people like Bonnie and her daughter Jill, and the myriad of other individuals I have met who were going through things that were way worse than mine. And the way they dealt with what they were going through with the grace and the dignity and the fight, that's what inspired me to get out of bed every morning. And then for me, being in a position that I'm in, I was getting letters from veterans who lost their legs or arms. And I was getting letters that one of them, there were two letters that just struck me. One was from patients in Metro's burn unit. They were a support group of burn patients. And they sent me a hang in there, get well soon card. And when I thought about what I'm dealing with, whining about a 10-inch scar that literally goes all the way around my head. And yes, I do have a bald spot I can show you all. When I thought about those folks going through like horrible burns, I thought, there's no excuse for me. When I thought about the veteran who didn't have his legs, there is no excuse for me not to get up. They are getting up every morning. What excuse do I have not to get up every morning? And then another card I got, and I don't know if you guys ever realized this, but after my surgery, I was blind for about 2 months. And so I had to have other people reading my emails, reading my mail, and I'm a control freak. So for me, that was very, very difficult. But I got a card, and it was a sympathy card. And I thought, okay, who's the sick person who sent a sympathy card? But there was a post note on it. And it said, sorry, this was the only card we could get. And when you opened it up, there were about 20, 25 signatures in it. And I couldn't see, so I couldn't tell who it was from. But my friend Sandy had read the return address, and it was from the Grafton Correctional Facility, the prison. And it was a sympathy card, but all the notes were, we're thinking of you, get well soon. And it was inmates. About 20, 25 inmates sent me the only card they could get their hands on. And I thought, why? And then it occurred to me that a couple of years earlier, I had gone to that prison and I had done a story on prison dogs, inmates who were training dogs. And when we were leaving, one of the guards said to me, hey, Monica, would you mind? We have not a TV thing, but a newspaper we're trying to start. And there's a handful of guys who would like to just pick your brain about journalism. Could you come in and talk to them? Sure. So I go in, my camera guy was standing at the door. There's about me and 15 guys. And I'm sure, many of them were hardened criminals, but it never occurred to me to have my safety in question. There was a deputy or a jail guard at the door too. And I just sat there and talked to them for 25 minutes and answered their questions and, encouraged them to go do what they wanted to do. That was 2 or 3 years before this. And then it occurred to me, the people who signed that card were the inmates from the dog program, and also inmates who weren't in that dog program. So I'm assuming it was the guys who were in that journalism program. And I thought, wow, you never know what a small gift of time could mean to somebody else. And that I will keep that card with me the rest of my life, because it taught me that we have a connection to everyone, and you never know what you say or what you do or what you offer, how it may impact someone else's life. I don't know if these guys are ever going to get out of prison. I don't know. Yeah, I don't care. All I know is for hardened criminals to send a reporter they don't even know a get well card was unbelievable to me. And it made me think, there is some good in this world. So gratitude is not, so many people I had met kept saying to me, who were going through medical issues, kept saying to me, I now know what gratitude means. Yeah, I get that now. I do know what gratitude means, because I'm sitting here in front of you. But it's more than just my life. It's the life lessons that I got. One of the first things the doctor's nurse told me when I called to make the appointment with the brain surgeon, she said, I don't want to scare you, but you need to get your affairs in order. And at first it was like a kick in the gut. And then all of a sudden I thought about it, and I thought, I should have that stuff done anyway. So everything that happened to me, everything that came at me in a negative way, I decided I'm going to be bound and determined to twist it. And believe me when I tell you, I'm not glass half full kind of person, but I decided I was going to twist it and make it something that I could deal with. So yes, I didn't have my will. I didn't have my powers of attorney put together. I didn't have all that stuff. We all need that stuff. So why did I wait so long to let a brain tumor and the, potential effect of death make me wait that long? It's not morbid, it's common sense. And let me tell you something, it's something you have control over. And that was the biggest lesson I learned, was that there are things you can control and there are things you can't control. And many of you are well aware of the serenity prayer. Please God, let me know the difference. I cannot tell you, that was probably the most important thing I ever learned, because there were so many things that were out of my hands. And I decided from July 2nd on that the only way I was going to get through this entire ordeal was to decide, what can I do? What's in my hands? And the rest, I could not control the doctors, once we're in the operating room, but I could control which doctor. And believe me when I tell you, I got second and third opinions, because that's what you should do. You need to be your own advocate. Back to the original thing I was talking about. And I think the other thing that's really, really important is fear and worry are useless emotions. They truly are. Worry, what does it get you? Except, an upset stomach. And believe me, I know many of you are Jewish mothers, because I have one, and I know what we're notorious for worry. Knock it off. Okay. Instead of worry, find something constructive. Find a way to turn that angst and anguish into action, because that is what's going to help you get through. It may be just one small thing. Maybe it has nothing to do with what you're dealing with. Maybe it's just go sweep the floor, go clean the house, something you have control over. And the other thing that goes along with that is, when you're overwhelmed and you have so much on your plate and you don't know what's around the bend, yesterday doesn't matter. You can't fix it. No one is guaranteed tomorrow, the saying, but all you need to do is worry about the next 5 minutes, because that's all you can think about. And if you put yourself, and what that is being present, and being present was a lifesaver, not worrying about everything else, just focusing on the next 5 minutes and what I had control over was really critical in helping me deal with the stress of my situation. Was I perfect? Absolutely not. The other thing I want to tell you is I went down the rabbit hole a few times, and my typical thing of going down the rabbit hole was avoidance. And one of the things I learned was I didn't tell many people. I told a handful of people, but I didn't go public with my diagnosis, and I didn't really want to, but we were getting a lot of phone calls, people asking if they fired Monica because I had taken some time off, and we were getting a lot of new staff. So we decided, okay, we're going to go public and let everybody know what I'm dealing with. And then hopefully I would come back in January and tell them the rest of the story. But I think I told a handful of people, and a couple of things I learned: if somebody comes to you and tells you something horrible, bad information about them, it's okay to cry, but don't cry in front of them. Keep it together as much as you possibly can. And then when they go away, that's when you can lose it. The other thing I've learned is when we did go public, I had so many people share their brain tumor story, or their cousin, sister, husband, whatever, brain tumor story. And I was grateful for that. I thought it was great that so many people were reaching out, trying to lift me up. But I go back to, you don't know who's on what journey and what that journey involves. It's better to ask, do you want to hear this? I have some experience. Do you want to hear this? Also, like I said earlier, I have a very sick sense of humor. I decided I was going to make jokes about anything and everything dealing with my situation, because that's how I was going to get through what it was. A lot of people aren't like that. So it's probably important to ask ahead of time. And God gave us 2 of these and 1 of these for a reason. If you don't know what to say, just shut up and listen. And the other thing that I learned was people would text, "How are you feeling today?" That was the last thing I wanted to talk about, was my brain tumor and the 10-inch scar and the giant staples sticking in my head. But the people who touched me were the ones who said, "Hey, just want you to know I'm thinking of you and I love you." But there were a lot of people who just wanted info. And that I know they meant well. But this is something from my perspective, and I'm telling you all this because I'm a fixer. I was that person who was always reaching out, going, "Hey, how you feeling? What can I do?" And that, from being on the other side, I learned I will never do that again. But what I will do is just tell someone I love them and I'm thinking of them, because I know how that felt to me. As a patient, my sister-in-law went through breast cancer, and she told me, "Monica, you need to suck it up and allow people to help," because I think of myself as a tough cookie. I can handle everything, right? No, I needed help, and I had to let people in, and I had to let people help. And one of the things someone told me when everyone was like, "What can I do? What can I do? What can I do?" Give them jobs. Make them feel useful. They love you. They want to help you, but give them a job and give them something to do to help you get through it, but also help them get through it too. And the other thing I want you to know is, like, I go back to being your own best advocate. I still have a very long road ahead. I'm not out of the woods. Like Jenny said, I have MRIs every 6 months. I just had one a couple of weeks ago. The tumor on my carotid and my optic is stable, but the tumor on the inside of my eye is wanting to be a drama queen. So I may be a candidate for surgery relating to my eye. We're not sure. But there's no guarantees. The last time I talked to my doctor in October, he basically flat out said, "Look, Monica, we're going to focus on quality of life and quantity of life." So again, I go back to, there are things you can control and there are things you can't control. I can control my quality of life as long as my body allows it. And that's what I'm trying to focus on. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I see I have one. So if you want to put questions in the chat, feel free. I'll answer anything. If you got pandemic questions, COVID questions, whatever, I will happily answer anything. All right. Bonnie wants to love you too, Bonnie. What brings me the greatest joy? That's a tough question. From a professional standpoint, when I do a story that I know is going to make a difference and people get help that they didn't know was even available. I'm so lucky. I have the best beat in the building because I get instant gratification, because if I do a story that people have, wanted the info, they email me, they get me on social media, whatever, and they let me know that, that was, usually it's, can you give me the name and number of the doctor? So it's something very small, but it is something that, makes a difference. In my personal life, just peace, getting time, free time. And believe it or not, with the pandemic, I just come through brain surgery. I went back to work and I went back to the bands, and then all of a sudden a pandemic hits and we had to cancel the majority of our gigs. And I had free time for the first time in years. And I got back to nature. I would leave my phone at home and I would take the dog for a walk just for an hour, and just reconnecting and being present was huge to me. What is my prognosis? We don't know. If you ask me, my prognosis is I'm going to kick butt and take names as long as I possibly can. Leading up to surgery, I decided I was training for an MMA fight, and it was going to be against Stipe, and he was going to kick my butt, but I was going to fight as hard as I can. And Jill and I were talking about this earlier. Something else that's interesting is a lot of people, I'm in a business where it is my job to never let you see me sweat. And I have a lot of people who, like, they take one look at me and they're like, oh, you look so good, you must be doing great. And, there are days I'm not doing so great. And, so the old never judge a book by its cover, it's real. But as for me, my prognosis is it's a long road, and it's my journey, and I'm going to deal with it. Honestly, as much as I possibly can, I try to forget I have a brain tumor, but every once in a while, my eye gets swollen or my vision gets squirrely, and I'm, Timmy makes me very aware he's there. No. Was it determined? Oh, good question. No. So it was not. So the question was it determined that this was hereditary?
I can't get it.
No.
There's nothing I could do about it.
It was not. Is everybody okay? No, it was not determined. It was hereditary. But my type of tumor, meningioma, is about 32,000 people a year get these, and the majority of them are women. And I talked to Sheryl Crow today, the singer, and she has one too. And a lot of women, especially women who, going through menopause, they think there's a hormone connection. I was at the right age. I also have a family history. My dad had it, but my dad was too fragile for us to do any more research. So we really don't know what exactly my dad's tumor was. But I'm going to I'm going to say, I would like to think there was some heredity with it. When I came home, I remember I was on a lot of medication and I was hallucinating that I saw my dad, because I woke up and he was looking down at me. And I said, "You're a jerk. You gave me this tumor." And he smiled and walked away. Now, whether or not he was really there, I don't know, but they gave me a lot of really good drugs. So who knows? All right. Did I end up at Cleveland Clinic or UH? I ended up at Cleveland Clinic only because I had known the surgeons at UH for a long time and had a personal relationship. So the surgeons at UH actually did my second opinion, and they looked, I even was going to request that they were in the operating room at the clinic when I had my surgery, but then I thought, that's probably not really cool. So, but Dr. Racinos is this young guy, the go-getter, the new kid in town, and I did not know him personally. But I did know that he did his fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and I actually called Johns Hopkins and talked to the doctor he did his fellowship under and asked questions about him. And then, of course, I told him that. And that's, again, you need to be your own advocate, because nobody's going to take better care of you than you. All right, let me see here. Singing groups. Okay. Yes, I still have 2 bands. I am performing at Shooters on the Water down in the Flats on the 29th. I think it's a Saturday, Memorial Day weekend. Not playing as much as we were, only because of the pandemic, but we're getting more and more gigs. So that is definitely changing, but we're kind of picky because our gigs have to be safe. Even though we're all vaccinated, we're still keeping safe distance and following protocols and only playing at places that allow us to do that. How is my husband dealing with this? La 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 la. Yeah, he you know what, he is glass half full, and he's the kind of guy, he's very metaphysical, so he's very mind over matter. And but he's also that guy, like when I need it, he'll give me a hug. But he handled it exactly how I thought he would. And he was there for me when I needed him. But I don't think for a second he's not worried. But in his mind, no, we're only going to focus on positive, because if we focus on positive, then positive things will happen. And he might have something there. It's not a bad mindset to have. Let's see. I am not the strongest person, Miss Jill.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. And I want to address that, because and not calling you out, but I'm calling you out. That was one of the things that everybody said to me. You were so, they did a story on me with all of my coworkers, and all of my coworkers called me a badass. And I'm like, that's what they thought. They're like, oh, if anybody's going to deal with this, Monica's got it. She's a badass. She can fight anything. She's tough. And then I thought, wow, that's the message I'm putting out there. But here's what I will tell you. None of us know how strong we are until something is thrown in our face and we have to deal with it. And believe me when I tell you, I talked to you about going down the rabbit hole a few times. I allowed myself to go down that rabbit hole. I'm human, okay? Don't beat yourself up for feeling sorry for yourself for a couple of minutes. It's okay to go down that rabbit hole, but that rabbit hole is dark. It has no cable or Wi-Fi, and it'll ruin your shoes because it's damp. So get your booty out and go do what you got to do. But don't beat yourself up for, having those moments, because goodness, I didn't know if I was going to live or die. I mean, but none of us do. Come on. That we get hit by a bus tomorrow. I mean, it is what it is. None of us know what's next. So that's why it's important to realize that we are all strong. Some of us may handle things better than others, but don't think for a second that I was stronger than Jill, because I know I'm not, because I know what you've gone through. And I don't know, and that's my other point about, you never know what journey somebody else is on, because if you think for half a second you would trade yours, when you find out, you would think twice. And I'll keep my brain tumor, because I know what other people have dealt with. Let's see. I am not a role model, but thank you. Here's a non-health question. Hi, Cantor Kathy. Did I ever perform in musicals, and what roles did I play? Okay, funny story. I went to college to sing opera. That's how I literally sang my way into West Virginia University, into their applied voice program. And they wanted me to be an opera singer, and I wanted to be a rock star. But yes, I did musical theater, and probably the biggest role I had, I was Adelaide in Guys and Dolls. And yeah, when we did Take Back Your Mink, I got to strip in front of my parents. That was awesome. But yeah, that I've done musical theater, but not a lot, mainly because there's no time. But I would love to get back into that if I ever retire. Let's see. What is my Jewish connection early life? Too personal. I will tell you, I was raised Jewish. And actually my father was Jewish. My mother's from Norway. She converted to marry him, and she actually did her conversion here in Cleveland. So my parents met and married in Cleveland. And I don't remember the synagogue where they got married. But and then my mom was probably more Jewish than my dad. But as we got older, we never really belonged to a temple. So my connection was not very close. And I did go to Hebrew school until it was time for bat mitzvah. We couldn't afford it. So, and there were a few other reasons too, but no, I've never been bat mitzvahed. And honestly, and I know Ginny didn't mention, but they just, I now write an article for the Cleveland Jewish News, Cleveland and Columbus Jewish News, called Monica's Medical Mishigas, and you can find it every other month. But this is because I have a boss now who is Jewish. I'm reconnecting. I had my aunt and uncle, Ed and Helene Robbins. I call them the Uber Jews, because they were in Cleveland Heights, and while they were still living, we did all the holidays and all of that stuff. And my cousin Sherry lives in Jerusalem. So yeah, that is my connection. I was forced to tell everyone. That's a really good question. The question was, since I was because of what I do, I was kind of forced to tell everybody, was it freeing or not? If I had my druthers, I never would have told a soul. I had gone through other medical issues and kept them to myself. The only difference why I did with this one was because we didn't know, if I was even going to come back. And we thought it was, I had been here for so long, it was probably wise for me to tell people if I didn't come back, why. And two, that, honestly, the driving force, personally, if it was Monica wouldn't have said anything, but News Monica, I was so well aware of the stories that I had the privilege of telling for other people. And people would reach out to me wanting more information about them or even wanting to get in touch with that person. I was so aware of the education that one story could give. And honestly, it was from other people who I had done stories on that encouraged me to go public, because I thought, you know what, whatever happens to me, if my story could be someone else's survival guide, that's why God gave this to me. And I know that sounds like, you know, like overwhelming, but it's really, I've seen it with other people. So I thought, my job is to educate, you know, and inform. So if this is what I need to do, then this is what I need to do. So freeing, no. Purposeful, yes. And that was gratifying. Some of my favorite places in Cleveland. Well, earlier, Jenny said I ride a Harley Davidson motorcycle. So I'm a biker chick, which there's like, people who know me well will tell you there are several different Monicas. Like I'm pretty much Sybil. You know, there's the TV Monica. The real Monica is the girl who's up on stage cranking out some Janis Joplin or something. That's me. That is my comfort zone. That is my therapy. That is where I feel most relaxed. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but I had to go to mini med school to learn how to do this job and at least to speak doctor speak. And I'm so fortunate. I talk to brilliant people every day who, you know, allow me to sound smart, but I'm just basically regurgitating the information that they've been giving me. And after I've double checked it. So, but my favorite places in Cleveland, you know, there are tons. And unfortunately, it's like, I feel like I haven't been out in a year and I've missed a lot. So I miss, even though we can now, I miss going to an Indians game. I love Blossom. I love all of our concert venues. I love the Rock Hall. I love, you know, restaurants. My husband's a foodie, so, you know, we will go and try some of these fancy schmancy restaurants every so often. I don't get to the east side. I do have a passport to get to the east side, but I live on the west side. And so, but we don't get there as often. But honestly, there are too many places in Cleveland that I haven't been to that I probably need to get to. I just need to find the time. And that's another thing the brain tumor taught me, is find the time. Let's see. What story or stories did I write that gave me the most satisfaction? Wow. You know, okay, I will tell you my illness, doing that story wasn't one of them. Oh, wow. This is going to sound really weird, but I mean, I have a handful of Emmys downstairs, and there's only one that I felt like I truly earned and deserved. And it was a story about a woman. I was driving to work one day and it was raining and I was on 90 and my phone rings. And I answer the phone and it's this woman who tells me that Cleveland Clinic or whomever, some PR person gave her my phone number. And she wanted to know if I would do a story. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the story? And she said, I'm pregnant and my baby has a fatal diagnosis and will die moments after I give birth if it doesn't die in utero. And I'm going to likely donate her to science, but I'm not going to abort her. And I had to pull the car over because I was floored. I could not believe this woman was asking me to tell this story. I mean, on so many levels. And she was so strong, and she wanted her story out there. And I asked her, I'm like, what? Why would you want people to know this? This is horrible, and you have to go through this. And she goes, I don't think you understand. She goes, while I'm pregnant, I have my daughter. And she said, I want people to know that there are options. And she found an agency. And I'm sure all of us know women who've, undergone miscarriage or worse, stillbirth. And typically, if you think about it, when that happens, there's nothing more for the doctors to do. They're kind of done. And no one, a lot of times, we always say, you shouldn't talk about it, or let's not talk about it. Or too many times people look at those situations and diminish what the woman might have been through because, the baby wasn't at term or whatever. And I don't care what your issues are on abortion or, those types of issues. That's not what this story was about. This story was about a woman who wanted to share that she had options in a situation that anybody else would have deemed out of their control. So her daughter had what's known as anencephaly, and essentially that means she had no brain. She had a brain stem, but she had no brain. And so what would happen is after birth, she would live for a few minutes, a few hours, and then she would pass away. And in some cases, like rare cases, these children may live even longer, but ultimately, so in many cases, when a woman is told this and given this prognosis of her child, they choose to abort. It's not uncommon. And she found out at 15 weeks that this was her situation. And she'd had a child, and she didn't want to go through, she just chose that the abortion she didn't want to terminate the pregnancy for whatever reason, but she didn't judge other people who did. And anyway, so she wanted me to know that there was an organization called Sufficient Grace. And it's a ministry, but it's non-denominational. And it's a group of women who've all been through this. The founder of it, actually, I believe she lost had 2 or 3 stillborns. And that's why she formed this, because there were so many people who just wrote that off. Like, it's our culture, and this woman, she chose to celebrate the fact that she was pregnant, and the baby continued to grow. They did the sonogram. They had the whole family there. I mean, there were so many things. They named the baby Glory. And then they actually had a photographer when Glory was born, and they had these amazing pictures of her with mom and dad, because so many times parents get divorced over these situations. And they wanted the pictures to remind them that her husband was there. He was part of this. And sometimes that helps. And they had the entire family there. They had pictures of everybody holding the baby. And yeah, the baby passed away in, about an hour. And, but that story, again, like many, many stories I've had the privilege of telling, it was information that so many women didn't know, because even doctors didn't know. No one knew that you could do this. They actually dressed the baby. She met with the OB team and inform them what they were going to, what she was going to do. And then ultimately, she and her husband chose to give glory to scientific research. And I just thought, the fact that this woman even allowed me into her world and allowed me to tell this story, that from my perspective, that was one of the most poignant things I'd ever had the privilege of doing. And, probably most people didn't even see it. But to me, I have an Emmy sitting downstairs, and that Emmy was for glory, in my opinion. Let's see. Did I write a book about this? Not yet. I had a lot of people ask me to do that. I don't know if my story is worth a book, but let's see. This is a hard end to the event. I'm sorry. All right, let me find a better happy story. I hope none of you are crying. It wasn't a sad story. It was a beautiful story. Oh my goodness. I'll tell you some, I have the ability, like I said to you earlier today, Cheryl Crow and I were chatting, and I have the privilege of meeting a lot of celebrities. But I've only lost my mind on a couple. And this is like my favorite story. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with U2, but years ago, U2 was in town, and my photographer and I were on a really boring story that we didn't really want to do anyway. And we were coming back, and it was the Beautiful Day tour, and the plane was sitting on the tarmac at Burke. And he looks at me, he goes, "Hey, let's just go get video of the plane taken off," because we didn't want to get back to the station sooner than we had to. So we go down there, and there's like 4 people down there taking pictures of the plane. And next thing I know, door of the plane opens. Now remember, this plane is on the tarmac, and the plane opens, or the door opens, and I see these big giant men get off the plane, and this itty bitty little short dude gets off the plane. And so it's like these 4 gargantuan men and this little guy in the middle, and they're walking, and I look at Dan and I said, "Is that Bono?" And he zooms in, and he's like, "Oh my goodness, it's Bono." Bono, who's the lead singer of U2, for those of you who don't know, U2 is a huge Irish band. If you're a child of the 80s, you know who they are. Anyway, Bono comes up to the fence, and he's like, "Hey, are you coming to visit me in jail, or am I coming to visit you?" And we're all like, "What?" And then he opens the door, and he comes in, and I'm like, I got a microphone, I got a camera. I'm like, "Hey," the only question I could think of was, "What do you think of Cleveland?" And he gives me this amazing answer where he talks about like how Cleveland, is industrial, and so is Dublin, and the guy was amazing. And then out of blue, all these people show up, and then all of a sudden the big goons had to grab him, and they ran back to the plane, and that was the end of it. But the funny thing was, I'm calling my producer to tell my producer that I just got an exclusive with Bono, and they couldn't understand me because I was screaming like a 16-year-old girl. And when I got back to the station, our newsroom is like 10,000 square feet, and we have this loft. And what I didn't realize was there was a tour of about, 50, 60 people standing on the loft. Monica comes running into the newsroom with the video, pops it into the the videotape player in the middle of the newsroom. And I'm like bouncing around, screaming at going, "I got Bono, I got Bono." And then that was my story for that night. And I think I was grinning ear to ear for like 6 weeks after that. So that was, and it was only because he got off a plane. Like, it wasn't to come talk to me. I'm sure he was like, when he got there, he was like, "Oh my gosh, like TV cameras here. That's not why I'm here." But he took pictures And the people who were there getting pictures with him, like the crowd that were the, 4 people who were there, they were taking pictures of me interviewing him. So I do have that. I do have evidence. So I did interview Bono. All right. So I think anybody else have any questions? I'm sorry, I don't want to end it on a sad note, but that was, where I was. I'm glad you all really didn't ask me a lot of pandemic questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for your inspirational and informative words tonight. We are so grateful you were able to be the speaker at our TWA closing event. In lieu of a fee, Monica has suggested we send a donation to the Jewish war veterans. This organization is meaningful to her as her deceased uncle, Ed Robinson, who lived in Cleveland Heights, was a past national president and had been very active here in Cleveland. Finally, I would like to thank Jen Mendelson for a job well done with her Q&A portion of the program, as well as my co-chairs, Bonnie Chizik and Ginny Sukinik. And I want to express my gratitude to all of you who have joined us this evening to help support the Temple Women's Association.